Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just waiting to be spotlighted. Perhaps I am already spotlit. I can't see it, so let me just make an adjustment to my view and then I'll be able to see. Voila. So good afternoon to our virtual audience and to our delightful speakers. A very, very warm welcome to this online event. Here you see the title, Off the Hook, Reducing Seabird Bycatch in the EU. It's an event that is hosted by BirdLife Europe and Central Asia as part of Ocean Week. During that week, 6 environmental NGOs in Brussels are highlighting diverse threats to the ocean and its inhabitants, and most importantly, and this webinar is no different, is discussing and offering specific solutions and policy recommendations to tackle them. My name is Katrina Sickle. I'm a moderator and a broadcaster, and I have the pleasure of navigating us all through the next 60 minutes. I'm joined by a handful of fabulous speakers, diverse speakers from the stakeholder ecosystem, not least from the European Commission and from member state level. Now, we'll take a few questions from you, but right at the end, I don't want to promise more than 2 or 3 because time is of the essence. Here's the instructions. Stick your question super short, say to whom it's addressed in the Q&A, and our BirdLife team behind the scenes will curate a few for me to put to the speakers. Of course, you can make your voices heard at any time, #Ocean Week. So that gives you a bit more flexibility. Now, a little bit of context. More than 200,000 seabirds are killed as bycatch in Europe every year, and the EU, as you know, I think from joining this event, has been aware of it for decades, and of course in 2012 did publish an action plan for reducing incidental catches of seabirds in fishing gears. The 2030 Biodiversity Strategy includes an action plan to conserve fisheries resources and to protect marine ecosystems. Now, in light of the fact that in reality, very little progress, limited progress, I would say, the Commission obviously has a chance to discuss this in this webinar. Little progress has been made since 2012 for a plethora of reasons: lack of awareness, lack of data and data gathering, of monitoring, of training, non-uptake of possible funds, tricky discussions around REM and the use of e-logs, tepid response in some political quarters at member state level. All of these issues will probably crop up in today's chat. Pressure is mounting to make sure that the new action plan really does what it says on the tin and bring about significant improvements. And just so you know, this event is a platform for BirdLife to assess what did and didn't happen in the wake of the last action plan, and as I said, propose concrete recommendations for going forwards. Now, first of all, before I invite BirdLife's Senior Head of Policy to join us and just give the top lines of those recommendations, we're going to watch a short video on the topic on the table. So thank you for playing our clip, if you will. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen, and you saw there at the end, we saw those words, we can still turn the tide for our ocean, but time is ticking. So let me invite directly to join me, please, BirdLife Senior Head of Policy for Europe and Central Asia. I think that is correct, if we can just see his title there on screen. Indeed, Ariel Brunner. So if we, there we go, we can share a screen, delightful. So lovely to have you here. Let us literally get stuck right in, because I'm going to ask you to share a little bit, not just what are the recommendations, but a little bit the why of the recommendations, and you can give some top lines to frame our discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So you've heard the story, and this is really the headline. We have hundreds of thousands of birds needlessly dying in fishing gear. It doesn't make any sense. It's an ecological tragedy. It is driving species extinct. We've known about it for a lot of time. We've worked for, imagine, 12 years it took us to get the EU to adopt a plan of action. And back then we were very enthusiastic about it because there was a blueprint for starting to solve the problem. A decade has passed. Let's move to the next one. And after a decade of action, or rather inaction, we've done what we always do when decision makers make promises. We have memory like elephants, and we come back and check what have they been delivering. And what have they been delivering is not much. You can read the full report, but if there is one figure to take home is that 80% of the actions have not been done at all. And another 10% have been done so and so. So basically, I'm afraid we are facing a failure. Not nice to say so, but that's a situation. And that leaves us in a situation where not only we are wrecking the ecosystem, but we are also violating both EU legislation and international commitments we have, for example, under the Convention on Migratory Species. Next. Now, looking at the recommendations that come out of this report, which are more interested in what has not been done is what needs to be done. Well, the headlines are the following. First of all, we need to enforce the law. Sounds trivial, but it's not happening. We need, if species are protected on books, they need to be protected in the sea. That means member states enforcing the law on the fishing industry and the Commission enforcing EU law on the member states. Might not always be pleasant, but it needs to be the rule, not the exception or the extrema ratio. It just needs to be the way society works. We need to get the data and the facts. Now, to do that, one thing that has massively changed in the last decade is technology. Electronic monitoring is now cheap, readily available, can be fitted on boats of all sorts of sizes. It's not perfect, but it can help us a lot. So there is no reason why we should not know what is happening at sea at this point. Then we need to start deploying in a mandatory way those mitigation measures that work. We know that things like making the hooks sink faster, or scaring devices, or night setting, those kind of things can solve the problem. In places like Namibia, the Antarctic, we have fisheries where we have basically shut down bycatch. We can do it there, we can do it in Europe. We need to start implementing those measures in a binding way. And then we need to invest in training and educating the fishing community. Fishermen do not want to catch birds in most cases, but they need the access to the techniques, to the information, and that means that someone needs to go out to the waterfront and to the boats and make the connection between the papers and the boats. And finally, we need to invest in research. We have gears, like in many cases, gill nets, where we don't actually know how to solve the problem. That means that in the most critical situations, we actually probably need to stop the fishing in certain seasons, in certain places, but there is a lot of ongoing research and we need a lot more of it. And then of course we need it to be used. Moving on, the Commission is about to roll out an action plan on improving basically the delivery of the common fisheries policy for biodiversity. This is one of the really important commitments of the new EU biodiversity strategy, which has been, by the way, endorsed with a massive majority just the other night in the European Parliament. It has already been endorsed by the Council. It's very clear that the European public cares deeply about biodiversity. It's very clear that without biodiversity, none of the rest of what we do really matter or can continue working. This is a small part of this bigger fight. When the Commission brings up this action plan, which will be on a lot more things than just bycatch, but in the case of bycatch, it gives us the opportunity to correct what has gone wrong with the previous action plan, we need to make sure that this is a plan of action and not another plan of inaction. And that means, in a nutshell, it needs to be clear who does what. We cannot have more of those generic commitment of all of us together will solve the problem. It needs to be clear whether it's the Commission doing it or the member states doing it, and people then need to be held accountable for actually doing it. We need regular reporting obligations. We cannot again commit ourselves to do stuff and then come again after 10 years and discover that we haven't done it. We need to track it year by year. We need to have those regular assessments, which need to have consequences, which I'm afraid means that the Commission needs to also exercise its role of guardian of the treaty and take people to court when they don't do what they legally are obliged to do. And finally, we need to put the money behind it, because all of those things cost money. Now, there is money. There is a lot of money that is going into the MFAF, now it's called, but anyway, the Marine Aquaculture and Fisheries Fund of the EU. The problem is that until now, member states have much preferred to use it for fishing subsidies that the problem was, than for the kind of deploying sustainable solution that actually solve the problems. The member states are writing the plans as we speak. The Commission will have to approve them. This is the opportunity for the member states to write good plans, the Commission to only approve good plans and refuse bad plans, so that we can actually give our fishermen and fishermen women the support that they need in order to start solving this problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think I disappeared there. I thought it was you freezing, and then I discovered it was me who disappeared. But I heard absolutely 80%. I'm picking up on your percentages there. So I just want to reiterate, you say 10%, just to look on a positive element. When you talk about that 10%, it's a quick answer, please. What do you think did get done? Was it the low-hanging fruit, and why did it get done?
In a nutshell, what got done were Commission proposals. So where the Commission committed itself to make a legal proposal, which the Commission can decide to do and do, it has happened. Everything that required member state to do something didn't get done.
Okay.
Everything that required, the member states to work with the Commission either didn't get done or got done very sloppily.
Okay, or got done by using funds, as you said there, I think perhaps using funds for ends which then ended up worsening the situation. So we will hear, and we will absolutely hear from the Commission, from two different Directorates General. Just to say, I have in front of me, look, here it is. I have a letter from the Commission. You actually did address them and received a letter, very, very comprehensive reply. Now that of course was under Commissioner Vella, about your concerns, and the Commission did share your concerns and did indeed say, we are looking at this is covered under this policy area, this initiative, and I know that there is still, even off the back of that, there is still not enough going on, and that's what we want to unpick. How can we make the new action plan actually deliver? Thank you for setting the scene for us there. Please take a break behind the scenes and continue to follow as I ask our panelists very shortly to come and join me. So I think we have a screen now that we can show you with the names of our four speakers. There they are. So as I said, we've got representatives from DG Environment and also from DG Mare, which is great to have both of those, well, a shared perspective, but both of their inputs. And we also have some stories on the ground, particularly here from Spain, where we hear where the NGO initiatives are working with the fisheries and how you collect data and some of those particular issues and problem solving that is happening there. So can I invite our 4 speakers to please join me? And I really hope I don't pop off again. Goodness knows why, it's never happened to me at a virtual event. I'm saying to you now and to our ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you can all happily chat about this without me even featuring should I have to pop back. Welcome to all of you. Before I come first to you, we have with us Jose Manuel Arcos, but I'm going to call you Pep. That is correct. We also have your Marine Programme Coordinator with a partner, BirdLife Partner, SEO, which is a BirdLife Partner. We have from DG Environment, the Director of Natural Capital, Humberto Delgado Rosa, a very warm welcome to you. And his colleague from DG Mare, who is Valerie Tan-Kink, who is Head of Unit in for the CFP and Structural Support, very much around policy development and coordination. And here we also have a technical advisor on marine biodiversity for the Spanish Ministry for Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenge, Rafael Centenera. Before I come to you, Pep, and I'm coming to you first, I just would like a 2-3 sentence immediate sort of response from the Commission. When you hear that, what do you think? You know, because it's been a very, very rigorous unpicking of what's moved forward and the majority that hasn't. Valerie, can I ask you first, if I may?
Yes, thank you, Katrina. What I think when I read that is mainly that well, it comes at a very good time. It's true that the action plan of 2012 was highly ambitious. Some things have been done, a lot not. I don't fully share the idea that nothing has happened in terms of member states, because we have seen very good pilot projects which are building up, but it's clear everything takes time, data and knowledge. But what we get now, I think, is very helpful because it gets concrete. And as you said, we're working towards the action plan, and the more concrete we can be in how we can tackle that and where are the real challenges, the better we can actually make sure that we move forward.
Absolutely. And coming again, as I said to you from the outside, there are all of these different areas that need to be properly exploited, not least funding for training, funding for fishing gear, funding for awareness, all sorts. And it's not just the funding, it is all of that knowledge, and also some perceptions on REM, e-logs, training for it. So there's an awful lot to look at. I think what really struck me from what Ariel said is we need to be clear who does what and who's accountable. That was very stood out for me. Humberto, I haven't asked you a question yet, just a response to what you heard, if I may. Thank you.
Yes, well, I was not in DG Environment when the action plan kicked off. I imagine, of course, there's still a lot to do. What I could tell you is that we have a different political context nowadays, in my view, in terms of the importance of biodiversity politically. That came from the Green Deal, where biodiversity links at the same level of importance as climate change to solve the global problems we have in front of us. We do have quite an ambitious biodiversity strategy for 2030 that addresses specifically bycatch. So I think that probably, as Valerie said, the timing is now opportune to take a real close look at how to make things better and more meaningful.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will come back to you shortly because we're going to get into a few of the specifics around initiatives and funding and Natura 2000 sites. But let me first come, if I may, to Pep and hear from you. I mean, you told me when we chatted before that a lot of work has been done, you know, with the fishermen themselves, you know, with fisheries. And we heard from Ariel, he said, listen, fishermen, they don't want to catch birds. They do need some help. So tell us what really stood out for you in what Ariel said, and what are you doing to tackle bycatch in Spain? How do you collaborate with fishermen? Oh, we don't hear you. You're being very eloquent, but we can't hear it.
Sorry.
It's all right.
No, I think that's a very important point. Because the message is clear. Fishermen don't want to catch seabirds, they want to catch fish. And which I think is really important is to get them on board in the search of solutions and in the implementation of solutions. So whatever measure we take, it should be with their involvement, because otherwise they are at sea, it's very difficult to control their activity. And if they don't feel part of the solution, it's going to be far more difficult to implement measures that are effective. And
yeah, but can I just say that it's not the NGOs, as one example alone, cannot necessarily always just be responsible for that involvement. I mean, it's also from a policymaker, from a political point of view. But I think administration in Spain, how have you found that alongside your own work?
Well, this is for me, or
yes, yeah, yeah. So thank you.
My we as an NGO, we have been collaborating with fishermen for several years, and our feeling is that they really want to solve the problem. Some of them really have a problem with bycatch, and they have a perception that it's really difficult in their activity, because in some times of year and some particular practices, they catch too many birds, and that represents a problem for them. And they feel also bad about killing these birds. But our view is that fishermen are very collaborative when they understand the problem, and they even develop their own mitigation measures, kind of artisanal mitigation measures, just their own inventions. But our feeling is that the administration is not considering this as seriously, and sometimes they are they kind of fear the reaction of fishermen if they try to implement any measures. So it's kind of, they don't realize that fishermen are already willing to collaborate, and it's kind of we don't want to put more problems on fishermen because they already have too many. And I would like to transmit the idea that many fishermen are really willing to work on that, and they just need the support of the administration rather than the giving them the back.
But and also from me, from what I read, is that the support can come in so many different ways, not just sort of funding, but funding for training, funding in order to make changes to fishing gears, which can be very cost effective. So that sort of level of support, it needs to be quite holistic. Just while you've opened that door, can I come? I'm just going to jump over the Commission just a moment, and if I can come to Rafael, if I may, because as I said, you were a technical advisor on marine biodiversity for the Spanish ministry there. You hear what Pep says. So what would you like to add to that in terms of what you feel Spain is doing to tackle this issue, whether it's monitoring, whether it's implementation of mitigation measures? Give us a little bit your point of view.
Well, Katrina, let me say first that I'm lucky to have been working 27 years on the fish for international agreements and for national waters during a long time. So I know very well what Pep is saying, that the fishermen are ready to find solutions to problems, real problems. What they don't want to do is to find solution to problems that is not applicable in the fisheries in Spain. We have a long tradition of studying the problem of bycatch in Spain. I think it's one of the countries with more information. There is a lot of gaps that we need to tackle, because there are a lot of fisheries that we don't have information. And also there is a lot of fisheries where the information is very old. Very old, I mean 10 years, because in 10 years you can have the change in a fishery that you never, you can discover that the bycatch disappear completely. And that's one thing we need to do. And also I share with Humberto.
Can I just stop you? Because I love doing this as a moderator, and I think no one would disagree when you say we need to do it. So how do you get it done? You have to ask for it? Is it because the policymakers fear asking the fishermen? How do you get it done?
Let me finish. I share with Humberto that we are now in a completely different environment. 10 years ago, the preoccupation in fisheries was the state of the resources, how we achieve MSY. Now I can say that we have achieved MSY most of the stocks in the Atlantic, and we are in the way, on the path to achieve in the Mediterranean. That's why in Spain also we have taken conscience of the problem. Also, we received last year a letter from the Commission saying that we have to do something, and we have already on the pipeline a national plan to reduce bycatch, not only for birds but also for cetaceans and sea turtles. And that's an ambition plan with a lot of measures that tackle the real problem. What are the fisheries with risks, where we have gaps on information, what are the measures that have been proved elsewhere and we can replicate in Spain, and also to participate with the fishery sector to implement those new measures that for sure will end in a regulation specific for, let's say, the long line, bottom long line in the Mediterranean to protect the seabirds. And that's something that we are doing that year, and very soon to discuss with the NGOs and the fishery sector, and also the local governments in Spain, because it's important. Okay. And that's something that our government has taken very seriously.
Okay, I'm going to put thank you very much. I said, I know that you said which were let me come to the Commission, if I may now. I might just swap this around a bit, actually, because we talked about, I had a few questions for you, but if I might come, Umberto, and first of all start with coming back to Ariel's comment. We need to be clear who does what. And also this mention of those who have specifically under, the Birds Directive specifically violated law. So what, will the Commission launch infringement proceedings against member states that haven't established, let's say, proper fisheries management resources to address the issue, or appropriate measures under the common fisheries policy? What's the deal? You have launched infringement in other areas, but not with seabirds, I believe.
No, we did. I'll get to that. But let me first say that, of course, ensuring the effective management of Natura 2000 network, which is a requirement of EU legislation, is, of course, our priority, and it was reinforced as one of the main targets of the Biodiversity Strategy for 2030. So yes, we are as part of our enforcement strategy, we are focusing on the issue of bycatch, including in Natura 2000 sites protecting seabirds, and we are effectively analyzing compliance and taking legal action where appropriate. We have done it already for 3 member states. I can also add that we are implementing a contract to assess the quality of conservation objectives and measures in special protected areas and their effectiveness in certain member states. This will certainly tell us more about issues, gaps, also examples of best practices. It does cover marine sites, and we will also be proposing and testing a EU-wide system to assess the management effectiveness of marine Natura 2000 sites and other marine protected areas. So I do think that these actions altogether, together with the member states and other stakeholders, will help eliminate paper parks and will bring us closer to the goals that were endorsed in the Biodiversity Strategy.
And do you think, I mean, again, just you yourself said, and we had an agreement that there's, much more, there's this political ambition behind it. There's a change in the climate. We heard again from Ariel that, it's the public are much more aware, it's a concern. There was some good stuff in terms of what was proposed in the last action plan. And even so, not even on the side of infringement, not everything that could have been done by the Commission was done. So how do you feel it's going to be different this time around?
Well,
and you weren't there. I mean, absolutely. You just said you weren't there the last time, but how can we get the actual doing of it better?
I'll tell you, the first element is, and to repeat myself, the political attention and societal attention has increased a lot. But the second element comes from reinforced governance. If you take a look in the biodiversity strategy, not only for bycatch, but for everything, we are proposing indeed a new monitoring system and a governance system with the member states that will look to each of the actions and the strategy and see what is being done or not, at what level we are towards full achievement of them. So we are in the, again, as I say, in a different political context. And as I said, we already launched infringement procedures against some member states on failures to monitor bycatch and to take the preventive measures. This was also in protected sites, the 2,000 sites for birds. And indeed, this issue of when you have a risk of bycatch, shown, for example, by the overlap of species distribution and fishing gear known to cause bycatch, we can't just wait to see the killing or disturbance of the birds. The law requires preventive measures to be implemented. So we are actually assessing compliance, dialoguing with the member states also to bring them support as needed. And I think we have a different context. I was not there, I'm now here, and I do see quite some more political priority on this topic, including from our commissioner.
I love that. I love the way you actually said it. I was not there. I almost made it sound as though, Katrina, I'm actually here now, so all of this is going to be sorted because you're here. Well, I hope so. I'm going to come to your colleague, Valerie, and then I will come back to you, Pep. Let's look at data, because Umberto was talking about reinforced governance, reinforced monitoring. We know we have some data on the amount of seabirds killed per year, but it's not even absolutely like really displaying the worst, is it? Because it's really tricky. It's so important to get this data. So what are you doing to improve data collection specifically with this issue?
Well, yeah, it's data is everything for all that we do, whether it's managing the fish stocks or managing bycatches of sensitive species. So not only birds. What we are doing or have been doing since the action plan and since the reform of the fisheries policy, we have the data collection framework in place, which is the key tool that member states use for the data collection. And I mentioned it before, in the last years, there have been a lot of pilot projects in terms of looking concretely what can be done. And on the basis of those pilot projects, and just given that we have some Spanish participants here, I think, for example, the ones in Spain on the Balearic shearwater was a good example. We've built on those, and now we have the data collection map, so the multi-annual plan, which builds on that and provides the platform and the way of implementing it and improving data. Apart from that, we also have various regional grants to work. It's not that we're there yet in terms of data, but what we've seen over the last few years, and also with the change, as Umberto says, the political momentum, the focus is changing. We see it with the member states. There has been a lot of effort on the sustainable management of fish stocks, which is still a challenge, especially for the Mediterranean, but for the Atlantic, we've reached quite good results on where we are now. And with that, we see that priorities are changing towards looking more at the impact of fisheries on sensitive habitats, on sensitive species, and providing us with that better data and a better basis to then regulate and be sure we get it right.
And just to say, and again, because that's my job also to play, I don't know if even the right word is playing devil's advocate, but useful to hear that there is, you know, in terms of the data collection framework having been implemented by member states regarding bycatch, well, it wasn't. So it is challenging. And also that the EU, the multi-annual programme recently revised, is probably not specific enough to ensure proper data collection. I mean, do you think it needs to go further? Do you think, listen, it's hard. There's the EU, there's member states. I'm clear, but do you think the EU is doing the absolute maximum it could, given what has come before and what has not been respected?
I think it's all about priorities, of course, in the end. I think where we are now, I would say, yes, the framework provides the possibilities to do. In the end, it's end user driven. So we are really looking also from the Commission side, but from the member state side, how we can put more focus. But it's also clear that the data collection framework alone will not do it. It's there to look at the impacts on the sensitive species and on the fisheries more generally. But it's much more than that. It's also to know about the populations. It's to know where are they, what is really happening. So there's more to it. And so the data collection framework is one of the tools we have, but we're also very much looking what else can be done. And there, that links to the dialogue that is there with the member states on how they're implementing the Birds Directive, the Natura 2000. It's a combination of things. So
okay,
there's more to be done for sure, but I think we're on the right track.
okay, thank you. Just while I'm going to come back to Pep here, and then I'd like to just talk with you again about funding, because that's important to get that in the mix, and I will come back to our other two gentlemen. And you can, the Commission, Valerie, if you have a moment, you're welcome to look into the chat that we have here, because there is a question that's come in for the Commission there. But if I come, you were nodding there, Pep, when Valerie was talking. Have you anything, specific to add? I came to you and said, what about the policymakers? You said, I think they fear the fishermen's little bit reaction. I asked the question about data gathering. They need support. What would you add to that?
Yeah, well, several ideas in my mind, but an important one is that data collection is really important. But it's true that we need also improving standard monitoring of populations of seabirds. We have little information, and in some cases we have little information. Some countries are in better position than others about this. But if we want to understand bycatch, we have to record how often it occurs at sea, but we also need to understand how this impacts the populations. And in some cases, this is obvious because, for instance, the Balearic seawater, we have important numbers of birds dying at sea, and this has an obvious impact on the population. But for some other species, it might occur that every small vessel has no perception of bycatch, or because they just catch one bird a year, 2 birds a year. But imagine when a small fleet, a small vessel fleet has 2,000 vessels, and every vessel is capturing 1 bird per year. That means that every fisherman don't perceive the bycatch as a problem. Yes. But if you follow up the population, you realize that the population is declining, and you can relate it with bycatch.
Yeah, Ariel just said, so you're saying, aggregated, when you aggregate all of this and you look at it across a larger fleet, so, individuals or both their vessels might not pick up. So I think Ariel said at the beginning to the point that some are being driven to extinction. Those were the words I heard in the opening from Ariel in terms of the vulnerability of certain populations of seabirds. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have an obvious case here, which is the Balearic seawater. This is a species that, following the most optimistic models, it would get extinct in less than, in a bit more than half a century. And this is because it's subject to a sharp decline. We lost every year 15% of the population, and it only breeds on the Balearic Islands. And we have been able to relate it with significant numbers of birds dying in long lines mainly, but also in other years. So we estimate that almost half of the mortality of the species is due to bycatch. Which means that bycatch is a major threat for this species that is doomed to extinction if we don't change the way of working. In this case, fishermen are aware of this because this is a species that is quite gregarious, and they often catch several birds in a single event. So in this case, bycatch is obvious and the decline is obvious. In other cases, it might be less easy to relate.
But thank you, and it's so important to have these specific examples. And as you can see, there's so much ground to cover. Let me just stick with that issue of data, the issue of knowledge, and just talk about the new technologies. If I might come to Rafael, and again, I say to the Commission, also to Umberto, have a glance at that question that came in from the audience that's in our private chat panel. You know, what's the position of Spain on these new technologies? There is a lot of conversation around remote electronic monitoring, and particularly for bycatch data collection, but within the new fisheries control regulation, how does Spain see it? What's happening there?
You know, it's a very tricky problem. And you have seen in Spain, in Galicia, the people contesting the question of the cameras in the vessels. We know it's a good tool for monitoring, but there are some concerns on the fishery sector. But at the end, what we need is to have the information to collect the data. And that's why we pretend to make an analysis, risk analysis of the different fleets. And when we find a fleet that is potentially catching seabirds or turtles or dolphins, we are going to propose an observer program and maybe cameras, but those are things that we need to discuss with the fishery sector in meetings, and many meetings that we have to do in this plan. And also one of the important things is to have a very good population estimation in terms of how many birds, how many cetaceans, how many species. And that's one thing that already we have included in the programs for the next 2 years, 3 years, to improve the data collection of the population and what is the biological safe removals, because this is one thing. Bycatch is impossible to avoid completely. What we have to do is to reduce the maximum, and for sure to reduce below the level that is a problem. And that's something that we are going to do in the next following years, and for sure trying to use the new technologies. We are going to start in a few weeks a test with the use of drones for make surveys of cetaceans in the Galician coast, and something that is important to try to use the new technologies also for this task.
Can I just also and I'm aware there's so much to say, and I will come back to the Commission in just a moment. When you say that, absolutely, listen, you said that we can't eliminate it completely. There is, however, a difference between accidental and incidental, is there not? So that's very, very clear. There is violation under the Birds Directive, but I just want to come back to this issue of REM, because you said it's a sensitive issue. It needs conversation. Is it because fishermen are not convinced that it really isn't to record them, but very, very specifically targeting data collection, that it doesn't have to be expensive, that the training is there, that it's not Big Brother? I mean, and it's got to be a short response, I'm sorry, because there's our fishermen who are fine with it, and there are other member states, are they not, where it's been piloted, and perceptions are changed through the piloting.
You know, you have to teach the fishermen, you have to talk to them, you have to show them that you are not there to prevent them for making money on fisheries, but to help them, because anytime a bird gets in a hook, you lose the bite and you lose the catch, the potential catch of a fish. And they know that, but probably you have to make a lot of pedagogy with them and to talk with them with cards on the table. Because one thing that the fisherman doesn't like is when you impose the measures. That's why the national plan that we are trying to put in the table is a national plan that starts with a meeting with all the fishermen, NGOs, governments, and everybody.
Absolutely, must be. Thank you very much. Okay, so let me please come to the Commission and just ask first of all, and I see we've got those questions, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, thank you. Let me just clarify something on funding. Can I come back to Valerie, and then I will come to Umberto, and Umberto, feel free to chip in to what Valerie is saying. Let's have a look at these national programs. You've got MFAF, you've got other funding programs. Ariel said there at the beginning that we need to put money behind it. So how can we ensure that those programs can be for this sort of plethora of needs, training, compliance tools, monitoring. And most importantly, I think I read that there wasn't as robust an uptake of those funds previously by member states, nor always that they're used perhaps on the right thing, and perhaps for something that might end up aggravating the problem.
Yes, so on the funding, so the MFAF has been agreed, will be adopted in the coming weeks, so that provides the framework. Then this program is implemented mostly through shared management, so that means it's the member states making the programs. What we are trying to do now with the member states is to really see that the way the programming is done, that it meets the objectives we've put. So the biodiversity strategy, it's a very important tool in that respect. And also from the Commission side, we are closely working together with the colleagues in DG Environment, so Umberto's team, to really be sure that we give the member states as much input as we can on what we want to see concretely. In the end, it comes down to them wanting to put those in the programs. And I think the report as it came out now, these kind of inputs that we get are of course very helpful in our discussions with member states. Ultimately, of course, for member states, it is a choice they need to make. There's seabirds, there are the sensitive species, there's the sensitive habitats, there are elements for fisheries. I saw also the question in terms of innovation. The MFAF provides so to say, the choice for all these different measures. They can do training, there can be innovation, there can be support to the sector in many different ways. There's also a big place for bottom-up cooperation between the stakeholders, between the different parties, because in the end, if you don't have them all on board, nothing is going to work. There's a big part on control and data collection, ring fence, so that at least a minimum amount of spending is there. And then from the Commission side, of course, we're going to look at the programs and we will be careful what we approve and not, to be sure that it's ambitious. But then also we are really looking.
Can I just have sorry to interrupt, I only do because you said a phrase there that leads me to ask you. So you said you're going to look at them if they're ambitious. What happens if, you know, the MFAF plans ignore bycatch, you know, at national level? Where will you stand there? How do you address that? Do you okay the plan? Do you know? I mean, I'm asking, do you know yet whether you will okay the plan?
I think it's too early to say, but I can definitely say for the Commission, we really want to be sure that what is in the plans is coherent with the biodiversity strategy, with our objectives. And so we will push the member states to go for real measures on that front, yes. Whether in the end a plan will be approved or not, it depends a bit on the situation. We also, of course, have member states that are landlocked, for which the situation is completely different. And member states have different challenges to handle. But from the Commission side, indeed, that's where for us the priorities lie.
Okay, can I just, only in the interest of time, and I know that we've sort of stymied ourselves because it's like all these things, a huge topic, and we are trying to keep to the punchy webinar length. I'm going to come to Umberto just to ask if you want to, certainly you've been quiet and listening, your thoughts, and also to perhaps address this question that came in about using funding to help innovation or implementation of innovation, because that requires fisheries involvement, and sometimes they're really not profitable enough to support the innovation required. But let me hear from you first, and then perhaps you might want to address that.
Very good. So my first thoughts comes again, biodiversity strategy, because we also heard about species threatened with extinction. So just to remind us, the biodiversity strategy sets a very clear direction and commitment that by 2030, bycatch of species threatened with extinction must be eliminated or reduced to a level that allows full recovery. And the same applies to species in bad conservation status or not in good environmental status overall. And furthermore, the bycatch of other species must be eliminated, or if that's not possible, minimized so as to not threaten their conservation status. And to support this, data collection on bycatch for all sensitive species needs to be stepped up. So this is what the biodiversity strategy says, and we will follow it closely. Now, heading to this, I can give an element on the financial side, which is we have received practically from all member states now their financial needs for nature. We call them the prioritized action frameworks deriving from the Birds and Habitats directives. So of course, on the dialogue with member states on their actual planning of the EU funds, we will take a good look to this and enter in dialogue if there's any shortcoming. But on this, maybe my main reflection is if we want the political commitments in the biodiversity strategy to be reached, we need a full implementation of the existing environmental and fisheries legislation for sure. And the success for this depends a lot of how seriously the fisheries and environmental authorities in the member states do address jointly the issue, including with sufficient investments. And that this does not happen every time. As Valerie said, we work very close together, DG Mari, DG Enlil, under the same commissioner. Not everywhere in the member states this close link exists, and we aim very much to foster this national level dialogue to make things happen on the ground.
Thank you. And I think we all, when we were chatting before this, there is, as I said, there is so much information. I think there is so much shared cognizance and agreement about where the difficulties lie. Some of them are lower hanging fruits to be able to address and tackle than others. Just while I have you with me, because I don't know if I gave you sufficient, I was also keeping my eye on the
Katrina,
chat there. Yeah.
I want to say only, like Humberto have said, that in the case of Spain, this national plan is a joint plan between the Minister of Fisheries, Agriculture and Fisheries, and the Minister of Environment, because it's the only way that can move forward. If you have all the people involved in sending the same message to the fishermen and to the society, that we are going to tackle this problem as fast as we can.
And you are right, and it applies to every single sector that all the actors have to be around the table, but at the right time. But how do you get that to happen? Somebody's got to pick up and run with the baton, do they not, to get that to happen? I mean, it's clear. Would you, I mean, any thoughts on that?
I have one thought, which is infringements and enforcement when things don't work. It's not the preferred approach, of course. We want much more to help implementation, but I've seen in some cases that's what then fosters a dialogue.
Okay, I'm going to come back, and this is something, obviously it's a technical, so this is coming in from our lovely bird life behind the scenes. So I'm coming just back to Raphael, because I quoted you on something saying, listen, it's impossible to avoid bycatch, but it has been proven that it is possible to eliminate seabird bycatch in pelagic longlining. The key objection to take up is funding the equipment. So there seems to be a disparity in the points of view. I don't know if and we don't have to spend ages because there's other issues that I want to come to, but I don't know. There's there's a kickback on that, saying, well, hang on a minute.
I don't say it's impossible to finish with the bycatch. I say it is really difficult in some fisheries. I know very well what's a hood pot, and maybe you use the hood pot and you don't have any catches, but then it fails and you catch one bird. What I mean is, what we have to do is to put all the measures and all the possibilities to reduce as much as we can the bycatch, and for sure to take it below the threshold, biological threshold, that allows the stock or the species to recover or to bound. And for sure, it's not only technical measures, it's also spatial measures. One thing that we have to discuss with the fisheries is, do we have to close to nets the areas of breedings of diving species like the cormorant? I don't know. As things that we have to discuss with them. The aim is to reduce as maximum, but we all know that zero catch or zero incidental catch may be impossible to achieve in some fisheries and with some species.
Thank you. So just coming back to the Commission, and I'm going to just focus in because that's important, because we are talking about the action plan, and coming back to you, if I may, Valerie. So this new action plan, we said conservation of fishery resources, protection of marine ecosystems, that's a shared initiative between you and DG Environment. Do you think, again, I think you may say, I don't know yet, but any thoughts that there will be specific measures that are binding to address the problem? Or is it?
Well, I can say, of course, indeed, I don't know yet, it's early, but at the same time, I mean, we do know where the problems lie. For us, the action plan is a clear moment of really bringing together the common fisheries policy and the environmental policy, and to see that we help bridge the gap. In terms of concrete measures or binding measures, there are a number of things which are already binding. It's about getting them implemented. There are also cases, and then I'm thinking, for example, on some of the seabird bycatch issues, or again coming to the Balearic shearwater, where indeed there are possibilities under the legislation to put forward Commission implementing regulations. That needs to be based on the science and the evidence and proposals from member states. But so yes, with the action plan, we really want to create the basis to put forward all the concrete measures that we can, say clearly who does what we expect from member states, what we expect from stakeholders, what ourselves we commit to, and what we can do if things don't work. Then, of course, all comes with the actual political buy-in, and we have to be sure that the relevant stakeholders and member states and parliament want to go that same direction. For us, seeing now also the opinion of the European Parliament of a few days ago on the biodiversity strategy, the support in the Council that we have for the biodiversity strategy, we have good hopes that we'll get there. But yeah, we have to see. It's early days to say exactly what will be in the plan.
Thank you. Did you want, just before I come back to Pep, Umberto, anything to add, staying with the sort of the EU side of things perspective? I'll just give you there we go. Now
I can just sustain what Valerie said, you know, and it's again this this political impulse and adding together the EU funds, you know, this idea, the funds are sectoral funds, but they're actually public money for public goods. It's not, the fund is not just for the sector as such, is to help the sector deliver public goods, which for sure nature and biodiversity is. So I do think we are in a positive context. We have a lot of expectations on this action plan, but also on this dialogue with member states towards getting the measures that the law already requires. We will have a very good test case very soon. The most endangered marine mammal in the EU, which is the Baltic arbor porpoise, is seriously threatened by bycatch. We are dialoguing with the member states and considering possible emergency measures from the common fisheries policy to help address it. But we need in the long run more long-lasting measures to solve the problem. So I think I'm in a positive mode. I don't expect a magic wand to solve everything, but I do expect a lot of progress in the coming years.
Okay. Let me come back then to you, Pep, because you've listened to all of this, that the EU perspective, where the EU can say, okay, there we could do more, but there, well, we can push, but we can't, and unless this fits into place, and so on. So if you could sort of say, listen, there's a plethora of information and of goodwill, but if there's one thing to sort of unstick and move forward better in the new action plan, what would you say? What's that one thing that for you would make you breathe easier at night?
I think the issue of bottom-up thinking would be really important, and Rafael was saying that it's important to have everyone involved in the elaboration of the plan or consultations with everyone. But I think it's also very important just not to prepare a plan with the opinion of everyone, but to ensure a follow-up with the participation of everyone. So if we just create a plan, we can go back to what happened in 2012. We have a plan and this is just paper and it's not implemented. If we create a kind of commission following the implementation of the plan, and there is a regular dialogue between the different stakeholders that are participating in this commission or this following group or whatever you say, and trying to have implementation on the ground, not just in the case of Spain, not just a committee that meets in Madrid, but also have some contact with the reality over the territory. I think that's the way forward. And I would just like to add that it's very important when we think on bycatch at European level, that most of the experiences that we have on the good experiences that we have on solving bycatch are related with industrial fisheries or fisheries that have rather large vessels. In Europe, we have a situation with a significant part of the fleet that is a small scale, with very small boats that in some cases are involved in this bycatch problem. But in these cases, fishermen have a lot of practices, lots of different ways of working, and this can affect bycatch. So it's very difficult to come out with a unique solution for every type of fishing. And this is really important to take into account and just to have a good follow-up.
Thank you. And I'm going to just come, and I'm aware, ladies and gentlemen, that it's 15:01 and I won't take more than about 4 minutes. So I'm going to do my best to stick to the time. But just to come back to you, Rafael, importantly there, when Pep was talking about, you know, really engaging, I think, the real reality with the territory, that's critical. And I think it's important to be very clear that everyone, including politicians no less, have a lot of competing agendas and a lot of different levels of awareness about different topics. So there's that, and there's another thing is kind of knowing about an issue and ignoring it because, or not reaching out. It takes energy, does it not, to reach out very, very broadly and make sure that every actor sits there at the relevant time. Do you feel, I mean, with your Spanish action plan, do you also feel optimistic, as Humberto said?
Well, I have to say, yes, we are optimistic. We think we have to do something on the bycatch. It's not only the problem we have with the dolphins in the Bay of Biscay that has been raised very recently. It's problems everywhere because we have information of the bycatch in nets and in long lines and the turtles and many problems everywhere because Spain has a very big fleet. And when you have a very big fleet and a I don't say tropical area, but most temperate area than the northern countries, you have many species and many interactions. And there's a political commitment to go ahead. And if you have the political commitment, and we know very well how to deal with the fishermen because we have been doing so in fisheries many years. Anytime you make any rule, you discuss with the fishermen and you go to the coast to discuss with the fishermen many times. So I think we are going to do that the same with the action plan. The only question is that we finish the document, we launch the document and we start working with the fishermen, NGOs for sure, because they help us much in recognizing where the problems are, and then start working. All the departments, fishery department, environment department.
And just out of interest, because that is also the richness of Europe, I think the Commission would agree. And in fact, Valerie, you mentioned yourself, listen, I wouldn't entirely say that member states aren't doing anything. I think you said that right at the start. You know, there is some good stuff going on and there are some good examples. So, for example, if I come back to REM as an example, you know, there has been some work done in Denmark. That was also partially funded by the EMFF. There was a demonstration of a feasibility of REM with Seabird bycatch. We heard examples there from Ariel in countries and areas outside of the EU, Namibia, Antarctic. So does one in a member state, sorry, and I don't mean to be too simplistic, look outside and try, there are specificities, but pick up and go, right, what's going on there? Is there that sense of looking outwards to see what could be mirrored, adopted, reflected, adapted?
It's already on the national plan. You will see in a few days, in a few months, that we have taken a look of the different solutions elsewhere in Peru, in Antarctica, in Namibia, anywhere in the world, because you have to learn from what others have done. And what we want to try to do is to look at our problems, to look at the specificities of our problems, and see how we can implement some of those solutions and make tests with the science by our sides and the NGOs and the fishermen, and try to detect what are the measures that are working, for example, for the Spanish porpoise or the Balearian seawater. This is things that we are looking at seriously, and the plan has more than 140 scientific reference on information on bycatch, and also on solutions of different problems in different parts of the world, not only Spain, for sure.
Okay, on that note, I won't come back unless you've, Umberto, Valerie, have you said everything? Because people are starting to want to get out into the sunshine now, so I don't want to outstay our welcome. So unless there's anything urgent you didn't get to say, do I have your blessing to close? Is it okay, Pep? Did you, yeah? Okay, so I really do thank you all. We skimmed the surface, but I think we did more than skim the surface. Thank you for bringing your examples. One of the biggest things that stood out for me, and I think that is clear in the new action plan, we need to be clear about who does what, but there seems to be that call for the EU to really accelerate the implementation and follow up on it when it's not happening in a heftier fashion. So infringement seems to be the big ask to avoid a repeat partly of what has happened come before. I don't think anybody doubts that keeping everybody around the table is absolutely critical and getting out there. And I do take to heart what you said and what Ariel said and Pep. Fishermen don't want to catch birds. So please do give them the funding, the training, the awareness raising, the resources, and get them into the conversation. So thank you so very much for being here and lending your voices for just over an hour. Thank you also to Ariel Brunner, Anouk Puy-Martin, Naima Crotty, all of them at BirdLife, the hosts of this event. Thanks to the audience for turning up on a very sunny day and shunning the gardens and parks to be here, and for your questions. With those last words, I wish you very much luck. Don't forget, if you're watching as part of Ocean Week, #Ocean Week, you can spread your thoughts to the wider community. But in the meantime, I wish you all a very, very good day, and a very good day to our lovely, lovely speakers. You are allowed, I think, BirdLife to close this event. Thank you all.